to the Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week, we have a special episode where we are covering for fall fun the film Something Wicked This Way Comes. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we are going to be discussing it from the perspective of horror fans who have. So, warning, spoilers ahead. And if you couldn't tell from the sound of my voice, I am not Jason Henderson. I am your guest host, Drew Edwards, filling in tonight. So howdy from Austin, Texas. I am the award-winning writer-creator of Halloween Man comics, published as of late by Comixology. Also in Austin, Tony Savaggio, the lead singer and bassist of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hi, Tony.
Howdy.
Joining us tonight is one of our favorite people, and we're so glad to have him back from the Rio Grande Valley of South Texas, award-winning writer and professor David Bowles, co-publisher of, please correct me, I'm sure I'm going to say this wrong, Kespa Comics. Welcome back, David.
It's 1,000 years to Christmas, Mr. Holloway.
Nice.
And did I say that right?
It's Chispa.
See, I knew I was gonna
you treated it like it's a Greek word, and that's kind of cool in its own right.
I assure you, I treated it like the dumb backwards hick that I am. But here we go. And finishing that up, let's see if I can just keep this murdering of the English language going. As always, color commentary from Julia Guzman, attorney at law. Say hello, Julia.
Hello, Julia.
Hello, Julia. So there you go. Apologies, Jason. I hope I didn't completely massacre that. You make it look so easy every week. Anyways, thank you. So saith Wikipedia, Something Wicked This Way Comes is a 1983 dark fantasy horror film directed by Jack Clayton and produced by Walt Disney Pictures, with a screenplay written by Ray Bradbury himself, based on the 1962 novel of the same name. Ray Bradbury was also the author of that. The film was shot in Vermont and in the Walt Disney's studios in Burbank. It was a troubled production. Clayton fell out with Barry over an uncredited script rewrite, and test screenings of the director's cut failed to meet the studio's expectations, so Disney sidelined Clayton, fired the original editor, and completely redid the score, spending $5 million on money. This movie was not a box office success, but has since gone on to become something of a cult classic. And on that note, I think I'm going to get everybody's opening thoughts. David, since you haven't been here a while, why don't you take the first swing?
Yeah, no, I mean, I had like really, really interesting memories of this film. So I read the book when I was 8 years old in 1978. And so when I heard about the film coming out, I was super excited. 5 years later or whatever, I was 13, and I remember going to the theater with my dad and just being just so pumped. And my little brother was with me, my brother Matt. And just coming out of it kind of, awed by the special effects, a little, I guess, miffed as fans of books tend to be when the movie is not the same as the book, but still like liking it a lot, and just, especially the ending and so forth. And just because I had like this really close relationship with my dad at the time, it felt like a great dad and son's picture. But my life would take a kind of gross, harrowing turn just a few years later, when my dad like literally abandoned all of us. And so I never wanted to rewatch it, because when I was watching it the first time, I was always, I'm Will. This is, his relationship with his dad is like my relationship with my dad and all this stuff. And then after my dad left, it's like, I don't want to watch that film because I'm Jim now, and I don't want to be Jim Nightshade. I really, really hate that. So I've literally not seen this movie since I was 13 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so rewatching it, I was, as Tony mentioned before we started recording, everything hits differently. And I was like literally at the end of the movie, like crying right now, because it like feels different as an adult. to watch it. And the first half is just slow, and the kids are not particularly good at reading their lines and so forth. But once we get to the library and we get to the showdown between Holloway and Dark, wow, the movie is just, to me, really really powerful. All of that, the adult stuff in the film, I think is really really strong, and I can see why Disney had issues. They wanted to make it like more family friendly and like center the kids, but this is really a film about adults, and regret and trying to turn back the clock and stuff like that. And the fact that there are kids in it and that the kids kind of like anchor the adults is good, but it's certainly, I don't know, it's not a kids movie, I don't think. I mean, it's like a very sophisticated adult horror film dressed up as a children's film.
Interesting, interesting. So, on that note, I want to turn things over to Julia and get if you had any of the same reaction to this.
Yeah, I first I want to say thank you, David. That was really interesting. Hearing that how many different kind of perspectives in the film you have empathized with. That's very interesting. I really liked it. I thought it was. I had seen it before. I actually think I saw it a few years ago. Because everything felt familiar, but I couldn't remember exactly what was going to happen. I think it's in addition to what David was saying, it's also interesting that yes, the older folks want to be younger, but the kids want to be, at least Jim wants to be
Yeah,
older. Like
yeah.
this idea of like, yeah, you want to just go and ride the carousel forward so you can be an adult. Nobody's ever, it's the grass is always greener on the other side. Nobody's ever happy where they are exactly. And I understand it when it's somebody, obviously who's lost limbs and is like, I'd like to be able to be back to my old self. But just the idea that everybody is kind of like, I don't like where I am in life right now. But I thought it was very scary in some spots for sure. I know we're going to talk about a little bit later about how some of the scenes were filmed a year later, but one of the scenes that was filmed a year later is that horrible spider scene. And I just have a huge thing about tarantulas. I hate tarantulas. That's why Kingdom of the Spiders to me is one of the scariest movies of all time. But this was the same as that. It was like just one scene of basically Kingdom of the Spiders. Oh my god, that's a scary scene. But there's a lot. Yeah, I agree. There's a lot that I would not want a small child watching. Maybe a 13-year-old, but not a little kid.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's some creepy stuff, some great performances. Some the music. I love the score. I love a lot of the imagery. Some of the graphics, especially at the end, don't hold up, but that's okay. It's 1983. What do you can expect, right? But yeah, I think it's a really beautiful film.
All right, that's awesome. Awesome thoughts there, from both David and Julia. Tony, what would you say your thoughts on Something Wicked This Way Come? How does this movie hit you?
I saw it I saw it on cable when I was younger, I believe. And
It was on HBO a lot in the
I
80s.
had seen, yeah, it was on cable a lot when I'd stay with my grandparents in the summer, and just we didn't have cable back home. So as many movies as I could possibly soak in, that was my summers. And I saw it a bunch during that time period, but I'd only seen it a couple times since then. And it did strike me again as watching it as an adult is just different in the way that you process horror. And I think that's kind of the magic of it. I read the book after I saw the movie, and I really enjoy the book as well. I mean, Bradbury is awesome. So and in a lot of it's close in a lot of ways. It differs, of course, but having him do the screenplay, the original screenplay, it shows. And I thought that was really cool. But it transitions from the horror of being chased by these, this devilish circus carnival into, as you're older, you see the themes of horror, of regret, of all of the adult things become so much more clear. I've actually talked about this, like it's kind of on the side, but when I was younger, in a similar fashion, in the way that adult things happen. Like when I was younger and I had this comic book Bible, this comic book version of the Bible that I had read. And
Uh,
I remember, one of the things I remember specifically is thinking, like, why are all these adults like messing up all the time? Like, why is temptation work this way and stuff? And then you get older and you go, oh, well, being an adult is complicated. And while you can't condone it, like, oh, that's how adults act, because there's all adult things going on. And I found that in the movie, watching it this time, I found a totally different take on all of the things that, Jason Robards' character is going through, and all of the townspeople it hits differently. And of course, this is filtered through a lens of having been through, we've read and seen Needful Things, and, kind of even recently, like a totally different but similar Bingo Hell, and all these, there's the ripples of both the novel and the movie have echoed throughout a lot of horror. And it is really nice when you can view things in multiple perspectives depending on the time period in your life that you're viewing them. I think that's another reason why it resonates. Also, eventually I want to talk about the special effects too, because there's some really interesting things going on there that we just don't do anymore.
Awesome. So as far as my own opening thoughts on this, first off, I want to touch back on something David was about, how this is in a lot of ways an adult horror film dressed up as sort of a child's adventure movie. And I've been thinking a lot about the difference between movies we watch as kids versus actual kids movies. For example, I'm going to use, because I've been thinking a lot about Ghostbusters recently because of the incoming movie. Ghostbusters is
And
not
because you always think about Ghostbusters.
well, that's true. I always think about Ghostbusters. But Ghostbusters is not intended to be a children's movie, and yet a lot of people think it is. It's actually kind of a mangy, weird movie when you look at it through an actual critical lens. But because a lot of people watched it in their childhood, they think of it as a kids movie. This movie, I do sort of feel like it does have the feeling that it was supposed to be, a movie that was for adults, but because it was Disney, and you definitely feel this looking at some of the other movies that Disney put out around this same era, that somebody went back in and were like, no, we gotta sanitize this. We have to sanitize this. This can't be as an adult as we want it. So you definitely feel that while watching it, but be that as it may, there still is some very powerful stuff in here, and it's a very it doesn't actually surprise me that it didn't do well, considering what we thought of as a horror movie in 1983. We were only a couple of years away from, a couple of years after Friday the 13th and The Howling, all those, and we're only a year or two before Nightmare on Elm Street. So like what was a horror film in 1983 is very this sort of almost, I would say, elegant and old-fashioned kind of movie that may have not have resonated quite as well in 1983, which is probably why it didn't find its audience until later. But certainly there's some very scary stuff in here, and everything with Jonathan Pryce is just so sinister and so good. And at that, I'm going to leave it at that and go right back into Disney has this movie was made in kind of a weird period in Disney history. It's what a lot of people call dark Disney, where they were trying a lot of different things, and they made a lot of unusual movies. They made The Black Hole. They made the amazing Dragon Slayer, which I think is one of the best movies of the 80s, actually. And they made the Dark Crystal, Return to Oz, and they made two movies that are basically in the horror genre. They made Watcher in the Woods, and they made this one. And nowadays Disney is so ubiquitous; it's everywhere. They have their thumbs in just about every pie. And of course they have this massive streaming service, which this movie is seemingly not on.
Or any streaming
streaming, it's nowhere. And I just wanted to know, like, do you think it's just Disney doesn't want to be associated with a horror genre, or why do you think? Because you can find Dragon Slayer, you can find The Black Hole and the Black Cauldron and all those movies that are also from this time period, but you can't find this. And I wanted to know if anybody had any theories as to why Disney's really the only way you can get this movie is to just go out and buy a physical copy. And why do you think that is?
I mean, I just think that it just left a bad taste in their mouth. You think about all the things that they did, from rewriting the script without telling Bradbury to like changing the score at the last minute, from Georges Delarue. He had done a much darker score that you can actually you can listen to online and through streaming services or whatever. And they switched it to the score by Horner, which, by the way, doesn't that main theme sound like the Imperial March from The Empire Strikes Back?
Yeah.
Every time it would come on, I was like,
Yeah.
man,
Well,
yeah.
there's also parts that reminded me of Young Sherlock Holmes,
Yeah,
which he didn't do, but it felt that way. And there's even parts that, and none of this is a knock, by the way. I think these are all interesting elements. But as I was playing through it, parts of it even almost sound like we've discussed the sound of made-for-TV movies.
Yes.
And again, I don't mean that as a knock, but there's a way that the orchestration moves,
right,
and the way that some of the themes are that reminded me of that. And it was odd, but the opening section really reminded me of Young Sherlock Holmes in a way, which, I mean, that came later, but I just, in my head, they kind of worked together, and it was odd. I had to go back and check. Like, he didn't do that, did he? Like, just the way it was orchestrated and the way it plays out. Yeah, and I need to listen to the alternate score.
Yeah, it's a lot darker. I listened to just a little bit of it before jumping on, but the fact that Horner had to put the score together so hastily means that he was likely just going by gut instinct and just instinctively kind of like grabbing from here and there. And I think that's one of the reasons that it sounds a little generic and a little kind of cribbed from other places.
But I like that it becomes kind of whimsical. Like it feels
does,
like
Yeah,
you're just coming into this special fantasy world. I mean, I don't know. I did enjoy it. It kind of has a Harry Potter vibe.
Yeah, it does have a bit of a Harry Potter vibe, and it's really interesting that he pulled it off. I mean, it shows that he's
I think it's effective still, and doubly effective based on the circumstances, right?
But I mean, I'm just trying to say they sank $5 million into revamping the film, and took basically like a year to like redo entire scenes and to eliminate special effects. Whatever. I just think that it's a dud that they would like to forget.
But it's a well-regarded dud. Like, there's even positive reviews from the time.
Yep.
And I'm not saying that you're wrong, but you'd think that at this point, like, there's been enough staff change out, because there's tons of oddities on Disney Plus.
That's
like
true.
there's so you'd think they'd be like, well, this is in our catalog, there's money to be made. But like, noticeably, like, Watcher in the Woods is also not on Disney Plus, and I do kind of wonder if it's also partly the genre. Like, they don't want to be associated with something that is you could pick up in the horror section of a Blockbuster back in the day.
So this is just a guess. It's an educated guess. Knowing what I know inside baseball about the industry, never underestimate when somebody important in the chain has decided, like, we don't do this anymore. This is not our brand, or that's a thing we'll never repeat, or any number of permutations of these mandates that get placed. I'm not saying that's what happened. I have no idea. But I mean, knowing what I know about how all of that can work, I would not be surprised if there's just this thing that says, don't mention it if you like your job, kind of like, maybe not even that drastic, but like that kind of thing of like, we don't do that anymore, and we don't want anybody to suggest it because we have all this other stuff. Like, this is our release pattern and this is the way things work. And turnover does affect that, because sometimes you'll get somebody who will champion something and go, that was the old regime. Why don't we, this would be kind of cool. I think now's the time we can do this. And sometimes those things change. But if somebody told me that's how it was, I would not be surprised. There could also be external, like, maybe we don't want to pay some Bradbury fee, or or there's any number of things like that too, where like, oh well, if we re-release that, we'd have to get these rights to this and this. Like, I don't think we've already spent over the $5 million and it was a dud, so let's not put our money there.
I'm not sure that the rights are an issue, because in 2014 they were like all revved up to make a remake of this, although that kind of like died down.
But the rights to release it, though,
yeah,
like all the stuff that lines up to
got it.
The bang for the buck of making a Blu-ray, where you have to get, I mean, there's still you know,
you could be right.
uh,
There could be some rights that have reverted, or like rights to certain things in the film. Yeah,
I mean, look, Fly Me to the Moon is not at the part of the Evangelion re-release because and people are mad. Like, there's all those widgety bits
yeah.
that like you don't expect. And again, this is wild speculation. I'm sure somebody's written about it somewhere. Please don't
If
write us
somebody,
angry fan
if
mail that we don't know
somebody,
it.
no, if somebody knows
But
the
I would
real
like to know
reason,
more about it.
Please let me know.
I'd legitimately, I'm not a scholar on the history of this movie. But I would love to know more because I am fascinated with that period of Disney. Like, some of my favorite Disney
Absolutely.
movies are from that. I think that they're so quirky and interesting, and even this movie with kind of warts and all, because it's not a perfect movie, but it's definitely a very interesting movie, and it's worthy of re-examination, to be sure. And I think it's a shame when stuff like this kind of gets lost in the cracks in the digital era, because like you find so much stuff, but then you sort of weep for the stuff that you can't find, and all they like this is we're doing this movie in November, but really this is an October movie. Like, all they had to do was like throw it up on Disney Plus with like Hocus Pocus and Mr. Boogedy and all their other more I'm not knocking that stuff. If you like that stuff, that's fine, but they're more safe by Disney standards,
There's probably not an HD
content.
transfer of it, though. There's probably not an HD transfer, and so it's probably like really tough to throw it up. I mean, there's probably a lot of work that's got to be done, and they're just kind of like, oh, really? For this fucking movie? Really?
I'm not saying you're wrong. I just like, this is, this is a movie that I've heard. Like, I didn't even know people didn't like this movie until I was an adult. I just started to, honestly, even up until maybe the last 10 years or so, like for most of my life, all the people that I run across when they talked about this movie, they talked about it favorably. And I only in recent years have started to come across people going, oh, well, you can tell when the kids do reshoots because they're too tall, and they start pointing out that stuff, and I'm like, oh, okay. But you may be right.
Yep.
Yeah, but I don't care about any of that. I only care about like what's the movie like good, and I still enjoy the movie. So
yeah, I think it's.
I mean, I care
it's
in the fact of how it's put together, but I'm not like it doesn't.
No, it doesn't make it bad. It doesn't make you not
harm
like it.
the movie.
Exactly.
A movie is more than the sum of its parts, and I think this movie definitely has enough parts that work. And speaking of those parts, I wanted to talk about the setting, this sort of America and fall before global warming, before this sort of mythic Norman Rockwell America that probably never existed. And this movie really spends a lot of time trying to showcase that. They spend a lot of time with the people in the town, and there's a lot of effort put into the look of the town. And I think it's interesting, particularly when you see the influence that this had on the book and the subsequent film, on stuff that came out of it, after it. Stuff like I would say like the recent It movies, which almost kind of subvert this expectation of what looking back at a simpler time, a quote unquote simpler time, might be like this. Did anybody else have any reactions to this sort of romanticized rural America that this movie presents?
Well, and apparently, I think even the book takes place like in the 60s, but this seems to be more like the 40s, with the costumes and everything they have. So it's even more, it's like more idyllic, quote unquote, as far as how things, the good old days, as they say. But I don't know because I haven't read the book. Tony, do you remember if the book is basically set
I can't remember. It's been a long time since I've read the book.
It's set
like
earlier
really
than
long
that.
time.
Remember, the book is set is written in '63, but it's set kind of like Dandelion Wine, more or less in the time of Bradbury's youth, which would be like
right.
So you think it's contemporary?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I feel like, I mean, when it was published, it was talking about things that just were 20 years past.
Right.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah. So and I think the film captures that. Like you can clearly see
Yeah.
that. Like
Well,
first, the 20th century.
It
Yeah,
also
like
becomes the past of any town that Stephen King writes about.
sure,
Like,
exactly.
if
But
there's a time in the past where they flash back in a Stephen King novel, especially early in his career, it's this time, right? It's this
sure.
town.
I
This
feel
Well,
town
like
is that
Stephen
in a
King
lot of
is more
ways.
cynical, though. Like
Yeah.
Stephen King has a
Oh no,
more
I agree with you
critical
there,
eye
but
of
it's
town America than
yeah,
this
what I like
does.
about it is that,
Yeah.
the kids are running through the streets and everybody knows them and they say hi to everybody and it's like the very close-knit community because not only because it's, the time period, but because it's a small town. So I love that. I love that kind of what's going on with each character. You notice when somebody's not there. If they disappear, like you're aware of it. I think it's really special.
Yeah,
I
and I
would
mean,
also pair this movie in a double feature with Dr. Lau.
Oh,
I think they would make a good. I think they would play off of each other
I haven't seen that.
in a strange way.
that's a weird movie. Sorry, David, you're gonna say something?
I was just gonna say, yeah. So
Yeah.
like this kind of like small town America has always been, and this is one of the big themes of Stephen King's work. It's always been a lie. It's always been a facade, right? Because it's small town America. It's a Wonderful Life kind of whatever. Like the glossy side of it is has always had like a darker underbelly of
Absolutely.
marginalization of certain people in the community and just things like that. And so and I think that you see that here as well. I mean, you see that
Mhm.
that there are people do care about each other, but there's darkness in the town that these demons come and feed off of. So it's
Sure.
not
Yeah.
necessarily a paradise, but certainly even that is this is kind of like the universal bubble universe. There's like this small town America first half of the 20th century bubble universe that has been manufactured on the backlots of different Paramount Pictures and others
Mhm.
in the first half of the 20th century and films that really didn't exist. Like visually, yeah, because visually also towns down here in South Texas, with downtown looking a certain way and it being small enough that people knew each other, whatever. But there was the railroad tracks that separated, like in our case, the Mexican American side of town from the white side of town, or in other places it would be the African American side of town from the white side of town. And
Yeah, I mean, Hearn, where I lived, where my grandparents lived, where I would go visit, literally that was the case.
yeah,
The
isn't it
other side
interesting?
of the tracks is super literal.
Yeah.
Like that's exactly, you drive across the tracks, that's what it meant.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting that the one African
Yeah.
American character in this film is the Dust Witch, played by Pam Greer? Or isn't
She's so
she is
cool.
amazing
She is really
She's
as the
so
Dust Witch. Like
cool.
she
Hashtag goth icon.
looks,
yes.
Yeah.
she is amazing throughout this, and I had forgotten it was her. And then when the
There
credits
is
she's so
one
great.
other. I'm hesitant to call them a character, but there is one other like African American person, which is at the carnival when they're all watching the like the football player that's missing his arms and legs, presumably from the
Yeah.
war.
Yeah.
And he's just one of the onlookers, and so there's very little there, but
Which, I mean, granted, this is like a town in Illinois, and the first
Yeah, it's probably pretty white.
Yeah, it is going to be pretty white, so that's unsurprising. But I mean, yeah,
I wanted to talk real quick about the guy because you were just talking about who lost, and I'm trying to remember the character's name of the one who's lost his leg and his arm. Is it? Let's
he
see.
is Ed the bartender.
Okay, because he actually in real life also had lost his leg and his arm. James Stacy is his name. In a car accident. But then apparently, so like I was saying to Jason, I'm like, I love that they actually used a person with an actual disability rather than fabricating pretending. But then Jason goes, okay, but let's not make this a hero out of this guy because he went to prison for molesting an 11-year-old. And I'm like,
Yeah,
okay, so maybe not him. But that was after.
Yeah.
But just in
Yeah, I
general.
had read that it was
yeah.
like a motorcycle accident where he'd like lost his
Yeah.
girlfriend, I think, at the time.
Yeah, he lost. Yeah.
I think it's again going back to the kind of I mean, this is a Ray Bradbury thing, so it eventually kind of becomes a Stephen King thing. But the way this is portrayed, even then, he's arguably one of the happiest people when you first meet him. But even the happiest person in the town, it seems like it has a lot of tragedy
Yeah. And he's
in
coped
his
with it
life,
really
and that I think
well.
all of that's interesting because
Well, I
everybody else
like
is just trying to deal with a bunch of stuff.
I do like with all of the townspeople, this movie doesn't telegraph their like you don't have like flashbacks or
Hmm.
not that I'm anti-flashback, like a flashback can be effective, but this movie really lets the characters be you learn about them through the way their actors are portraying them. Like the barber is this, he wants to be like this Lothario, romantic type, but he's never really, left his hometown. The way the talkative guy that owns the cigar store. You get to know you get to know these characters very much by the not even just the dialogue, but the way the dialogue is spoken. And the bartender, I think, is probably the best example because they never go out and say like, "Oh, his arms and legs were blown off by a German landmine" or something like that. You just
Right.
because of the time period, you kind of infer it,
Sure.
and
Hmm.
he's treated with a lot of respect from everybody in the town, not just because I think that he was this football hero, but probably because he's a veteran. And I just think that's kind of cool because I think if this was remade, you probably would spend a lot of time
Well,
diving into that.
Well, it also plays off of him and Holloway's relationship because so many people kind of treat Holloway, oh, well, your heart, you're not. It's part of his problem with his son and being accused of being a coward or all of these things. So he's seen the heroic nature of the bartender and his sacrifice, and that fuels even more of his discontent and self-loathing because oh well, I couldn't do that because of my heart. I couldn't even if he was too old maybe to go. There's that whole thing and how Jim's dad is going off for adventures. Even if he left his family, there's still a lot of that plays off in the way, but even the way they play off of each other in the bar, like throwing the football and stuff. But there's that air of, Robards' character, of Holloway feeling that and kind of his respect, but also it adds to that, the regret thread that his character has. And all of that is just done through really good storytelling and actors who are great at their craft. And yeah, I do lament the fact that a lot, not all, but a lot of screenplays tend to have to spell every single thing out. It makes me sad that people think that the audience just cannot contemplate that. I don't know.
Yeah.
It
Leaves up to the
saddens
imagination.
me.
Well,
Yeah.
I think that the one thing they definitely achieve with this movie, even though you don't really see a whole lot of the town, you see Main Street, which is honestly looks a lot like the main street that I right down that, like, strangely enough, like the downtown Main Street in my hometown still has these sort of cobblestone main streets, like the the cobblestone roads and everything. And it does have this sort of Anytown USA feel to it, that even though that this is set in the past and the romantic past and that, it's also kind of timeless. So they do a really good job of making the town a character. But of course it'll be a boring movie, so they have to inject something wicked into this town. And that's the carnival. So I wanted to talk a little bit, starting out with the way the carnival arrives and the way the two kids witness that, and then segue into talking about Mr. Dark himself. But does anybody care to describe the way that the carnival kind of blows into
Well,
town?
even before you open, you have the opening imagery is just of a train with like smoke that's lit up, or the steam
Yeah.
is lit up. And so it's just this beautiful the smoke. I have to say the clouds and the smoke and the steam effects in this film are very well done. There's a lot of that's great. I know they cut some effects that they had originally created where the smoke was going to turn into the carnival, and so they got rid of that because they didn't think it looked good. So I think it's
I wish I could see
effective.
that though.
Yeah, me too. I
Yeah, it
would
would be
love to see
interesting.
that because it's supposed to be
Um,
early use of CGI, like and
the
like
first.
hand drawn illustrations of all like morphing. That would have been cool. But still, I mean, the train shows up in the middle of the night, after midnight, a ridiculous time, and the boys, I just love the setup. I love how there's like this tree between their houses, and they've strung a rope across it, and then they can jump from roof to roof and just like go in and out of each other's bedrooms. Just it's such a neat little detail.
Mhm.
And they're like, oh shit, this is the carnival, and because there've been flyers blowing around because Mr. Dark in this really sinister scene where he just like is in the background, just like throwing flyers.
Yeah.
Littering.
It's just great. It's a great scene. Like he's kind of out of focus in the background, and Holloway is like walking along, going, "What is all this fucking paper doing flying around?"
But he does hit like the Steven Spielberg rule of character building is with they start with a silhouette, like the character just by the silhouette, basically.
Yeah. It is great. He's Jonathan Pryce is tall, and he's 6'1", and they've given him 2-inch platform heels to lift him up even more. This is the time when the man was very thin and a very, very striking looking guy. So I mean, it's just a great character. I love it to death. But
they wanted Crispy, and I
they wanted
probably
Christopher Lee. Can you imagine what that would have been like?
that I think he would have been magnificent. He would have been different, but
Somewhere in an alternate universe, there's a Sam Peckinpah directed Something Wicked This Way Comes, starring Christopher Lee. Holy shit!
Awesome.
Holy shit! Because Peckinpah was attached to it for many years.
I would love to see that, but I'm kind of glad though that we got Jonathan Pryce, because I feel like Christopher Lee, he's so iconic. I think that in a way, almost like he couldn't disappear into this part the way Jonathan Pryce does.
And then Pryce has this thing, this everyman quality about him that he can like very quickly turn evil. So like you see him and he seems like this nice kind of, maybe especially nowadays, kind of doughy kind of guy, but like just even back then, just an unassuming nice fellow, and then he can just go dark.
Charming. He seems charming.
There you go. He seems charming. He seems like a good guy to chat with.
As demons go, right?
Yeah.
Like,
well, a lot of
part
demons,
of his nature.
A lot of demons are charming. That's what makes a narcissist so successful is their charm.
I think Christopher Lee, unfortunately, probably because he has the baggage of Dracula, I think that, especially at this time, I don't think that he would be quite as believable as the nice carny version of this character, where he seems very much like he's playing a clown for a little bit, whereas
you'd immediately be like, oh yeah, this guy is evil, he's a demon.
Yeah, I find this whole concept of like with the carnival though, like of the autumn people, it's so fascinating to me. It's they don't really go too much into the mythology of it. I'll kind of get the a little bit on how they operate through just the movie, whereas they take people from the town and they give them their greatest wish, but it's sort of
like monkey's paw style.
Monkey's paw style. And then they force them into being part of the carnival, like the
carnies themselves are former people who have, that's one of the fascinating things, and maybe even former members of that town, because they've come to the town at least twice before that we know from the.
Well, and what's interesting is that when they do convert some of the people of the current town into the carnies, nobody really notices that that's who they are. It's almost like they have a glamour over them, because they're like going in this parade and nobody's going, hey, that's so and so. It's just like, oh, there's the parade, and I'm just like, are you not recognizing that your fellow towns people are now in the parade and don't seem very happy about it at all?
Well, with the older woman who gets turned into like the younger version of herself, I kind of understand that, but the beard lady is very obviously the barber who has been turned into the bearded lady. But
and the guy on the chair that they're holding up in the chair, who's, I guess he's just a salesman, so they don't.
He's
the lightning rod salesman.
Although I to him in a second, but it also, and I'm sure Stephen King would say this is an influence, but the whole business with the fact that this is a generational evil that always comes back. I can't help but think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally.
It's just very well done. This is jumping way ahead, but off Jason Henderson, our usual host, we'll talk about a movie often will hinge on just one scene. And I think if this movie has one scene that gives it its reason for being, it's that excellent confrontation that David already alluded to in the library between Jason Robards and Jonathan Pryce. And he gets such good lines that they almost like a precursor to Pinhead from Hellraiser. Like he has like,
oh my God, yeah, that's what I was thinking too. It feels they feel like Cenobites.
Yeah. Well, he's the what is it? We pain is the something he compares.
We
pain
butter our
to
bread
butter.
with the pain.
Yeah, I mean, good God, like,
and there's so much in that too. The confrontation and how they play against each other, and watching Dark try to he's slowly figuring out, well, how can I get what I want? How can I inflict the most pain? How can I inflict the most confusion? How can I get the children?
Yeah.
And him trying different methods. Like, well, what about if I tempted you with this? Well, how about if I say that? Until he finally hones in on exactly where he's watching, and he's the most cunning of devils, right?
Yeah.
And I mean,
watching and buying signs. So finally, he's like, "Oh, this is what's going to get you."
I think
also, if I do this, this is also where the children will you better speak, or else I'm going to do this to your dad.
I think
amazing.
I think it would be cool to kind of like quote unquote read into the record some of these things that are said. So Dark goes, "We are the hungry ones. Your torments call us like dogs in the night. And we do feed and feed well." And then Holloway goes, "To stuff yourselves on other people's nightmares." And Dark replies, "And butter our plain bread with delicious pain. So you do understand." And then he goes on, and Dark says, talking about how Holloway's father fed on goodness, he says, "Tasteless fare. Funerals, bad marriages, lost loves, lonely beds. That is our diet. We suck that misery and find it sweet. We search for more always. We can smell young boys ulcerating to be men 1,000 miles off, and hear a middle-aged fool like yourself groaning with midnight despairs from halfway around the world." It's like, fuck, you're like, it gives you chills, and like his delivery is, oh my God, that scene is just,
it's
like
amazing.
That, like you said, like that scene alone, like, is worth the price of admission to the whole film now.
And the stab, all of the barbs. So he's stabbing it at Holloway's character. Well, your father was a preacher, but all of the things that he did that were good all get twisted. Like, oh, he did a funeral. Oh, well, look at that. That's horrible for people. Oh, he married people. Well, those end in divorce. Like every single thing that he could possibly think of, that my father was this good person who did these things. Oh, well, I'm going to tell you the horrible side of that, and why we're here. And all of that's going to end poorly. Like,
and then using his father's diary as the counter for the years that he could take, the age that he could put in. Ripping each one of those pages out, and that flash of golden light. Holy shit. I mean, it's just like that. Like you're watching it and you're like, I don't know what the rest of this film was originally like, but that is something they didn't change when they reshot everything, and that just seems like pure magic. And
it goes into the horror of the boys, of now he's hunting the boys, and the boys are hiding. Well, it's all terrifying.
The whole business from start to finish of them hunting the kids throughout the town. There's another really amazing confrontation between him and Robards, and the kids are in this storm grate. And he actually, this is why I think people are like, this is a Disney movie. Like he flashes, it's so bizarre, but he holds up his hands because he's got those tattoos that kind of shift found on his body, which they probably could do those effects better now, admittedly. But
it was well done, though.
No, yeah, for the time, definitely. And he like holds up the hands, and he's got the the pictures of the kids on his palms, and then he closes his palm and he starts like actually like cutting himself with his fingernails
Well,
as he
when he
squeezes.
confronts Robards, he's like, "The truth is, you are lying to me,"
Yeah.
and he starts cutting it, like
That whole
But
scene
bleeding
was
and dripping
you know
incredible.
blood.
what? You know what? As chilling as all that is, you know what really made me give me chills is when they cut back to Will later, and
The
he's
blood is
got a
dripping on him.
trickle
Yeah.
blood down his face,
Yeah.
and then like maybe
And tears.
I hate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why Disney doesn't feel comfortable with this movie right there, because like that's
Coulda cut that
bleak
scene if they wanted.
stuff.
I'm still guessing that it's way more business
It
sided
probably is,
than
but
that. Because there's no like there's tons of stuff that's way worse or different, or I mean, it is powerful, and maybe that's it, but I wouldn't think that this scene is the one that, like, nope, we aren't the people
Because again, they
we're the
could
people who
cut. They
make
could
kids
cut the
movies.
blood. They
Yeah.
don't need the blood. Yeah, that was
Right.
extra.
Yeah, in Disney, also the other thing I like though is the Disney animators have a certain way. I don't know how, if they contracted the Disney Animation Studio, or if they were. I'm unsure exactly how. Who, I haven't checked all the effects artists, but the way that the smoke and the lightning effects are drawn, there's a certain way all of that moves. As an animator, I pay close attention to that. I'm sure other people pick up on it. It's not that's not my singular, like, oh, you'd have to be this. But watching it, there's a way that those effects look and those process shots look when there's the green cloud, and all the lightning effects and that stuff. And I lament that we don't do that. And for some people that looks super dated, but I do wish in the more modern age that we would have a film that would combine some of those techniques with perhaps better compositing software that we have now to really set it in place. But lots of those just really cool smoke cloud effects, lightning effects, the transformation of the when the Dust Witch is in her true Dust Witch form. All of that stuff is just magic. I love the look and feel, and I know that to some people that's probably looks dated and everything, but it's still just, there's something cool and comforting about those process shots like that and how they're all put together that I love it. I wish that more people, I would go back and use that as like a smatter, like a spice, like a smattering of flavor into our more modern VFX, which is, modern VFX themselves are not easy to create. Like, yeah, you're using CG, but there's a certain skill. But I do wish that there was a marriage of some of that somebody would try that. I just think it would look great.
Before you mentioned the Dust Witch, and before we move on from the carnival as a topic, I do want to take a moment to talk about her, because I feel like that this is not a typical role for what we think of as Pam Greer, who usually was more like of an action girl, blaxploitation kind of. I mean, that's what we associate her with. Everybody thinks of Foxy Brown and those films. Here she's this supernatural being that is pretending to be a fortune teller in the carnival. But what do we think her relationship is with Mr. Dark? And like, is she his partner? Like, does anybody have any thoughts on the Dust Witch in general?
It goes back and forth, because sometimes it seems like she's kind of running the show, but she's actually more powerful and he's kind of playing up to that. And other times it seems more like they're partners. And again, I can't remember from the book. Like, I should have reread it, but in the context of the movie, it kind of, to me, it kind of waxed and waned. At least I think they're partners, but there's a certain power that she has that he sometimes seems slightly subservient to that. But I also like that she plays all of these roles. Like, she's a through line in all these people's kind of the way they twist fantasies, even luring, she's in the ice at the beginning,
right?
Luring in the Tom book, Fury, and just how that all works is really fascinating.
Yeah, in the book, Tony, she's like her magic. She's like the most powerful of all of the people of all the Autumn people,
right?
and her power comes from her ability to be sensitive to and manipulate emotions, which is also what makes her vulnerable to like positive emotions. So the book plays that up a little bit more than the movie does.
Right.
Love and
Thanks for
happiness.
bringing that up, because it's been far too long, and I really enjoyed the book the few times that I read it, but it has been
super good stuff.
Longer than longer than it should have been, I guess.
The thing that I wish that they had spent more time elaborating on, and I wonder if this was lost in the reshoots and everything, but when they first introduce the Tom Fury character as the lightning rod salesman, he seems like he's somehow not only tied to the carnival, but then they have the whole scene where they introduce her as his bride. And I kind of feel like that there was and I know the Tom Fury character in the book is different than the Tom Fury character in the movie. So it seems like that there is mythology that might have been left on the cutting room floor, that this idea that she is also the bride, how the bride of the lightning rod salesman, and in fact she's actually slain at the end of the movie with one of the lightning rods.
Right. He's the one who kills her. Yeah, I mean, I think that there was like this intent to make him be like the foil, and he shows up before them, and he provides. These lightning
talks
rods,
about protection all the time.
Yeah, the lightning rods are actually protection against the carnival, because it clearly protects. It helps to protect Jim's house to some extent. Although, like, I guess in the reshoots they kind of like shot that out with all the 200 freaking spiders that they dumped on those poor kids.
Oh my god!
There's like 200 live spiders in that. They were like those two actors were traumatized afterwards. But yeah, I mean, like, but I think that also got lost, like that subplot. But it feels. What it does do is it gives like this sense of deeper mythology that we just don't know, that you can imagine. That the lightning rod salesman has been, following them around, trying to stop them from doing what they're doing again and again. And this time,
I love when they have their parade, how they kind of parade his body through town, like it's so macabre.
Yeah, it is really macabre.
And I don't. There is some sort of mystery in not knowing, but there is also the part of me that does want to know. But I before we move on from this, I to say Ray Bradbury comes up with some of the best names, like Tom Fury, Jim Nightshade. Like, these are so good. Not realistic.
Dark and Nightshade.
Yeah.
Well, also remember they're trying to extract When the Storm, because the carnival's over when the storm comes. So each time, and so there is sort of a deeper mythology where they know, like, when the storm is coming. We need to know how long we have.
Yeah.
I want to get that information from you. And that I find fascinating as well, because they have a fear, in as much as they can know fear, of having this all kind of fall apart, or at least be gone. Like, there's rules to this, and that is that the storm comes, carnival goes away, and Tom Fury is the linchpin for them finding out how long they have, because of whatever those rules are. And I think it's great that it's nebulous in the movie. I give me some mystery to kind of go off of, if possible, and I thought that was really great too. And then, like you said, like, but when they don't get what they want, they make him become a darker part of the parade, which is
so good, though.
What demons do, I guess.
So the Jason Robards character, Jason Robards has top billing in this movie, and I think he's excellent. But I think most of the themes of the movie really hinge on his character. There's this sort of Tony said, regret. And, there's all these sort of meditations on aging, and, he has a heart condition, so he doesn't feel like he can play with his son. There's also this backstory where Will fell into the river, and he wasn't able to rescue him because of his heart condition, presumably. And but he froze up, and Jim Nightshade's dad jumped into the river and pulled Will out. And so he's got this regret about not saving his son. And all this stuff about aging is strange in a movie that feels, to a degree, like it should be for kids. Like, the two kids are definitely the protagonists of the movie, but most of the major themes are about growing older. And you have the the teacher who was once the town beauty who longs for that, and all those the sort of, I wish I would have accomplished more. I think
Well,
this is both David and Tony said that this is why this movie, I think, hits you differently when you're older. So I wanted to hear more about that from y'all at this point.
but it's not just the aging of the adults. We also get the repeated theme of Jim wanting to be older so he can take care of his mom, so he can find his dad, so he could possibly so he doesn't get locked away or told to go play when his mom has suitors, which they hit on. It could, I'd be afraid that somebody would take too much of that darkness and stuff into like a more modern. I wouldn't, like, I don't know. I don't think it needs to go there, but we get the impression. So maybe he would, maybe his part of it, you get the impression part of his dream is, well, I could stand up to them and tell them, leave my mom alone, that kind of thing. I could go find my dad. I could get out of here. If I was just an adult, people would take me seriously, comes up. So it's aging and how that impacts people throughout the town, or no matter what age you are. But I think that's also why this movie works. Is I remember when I first saw it as a kid, it was an adventure to friends, because usually you have your best friend, and they're super tight because they have they can walk across each other's. I thought that was awesome as a kid, right? Like, I had my best friend, I would stay over at his house all the time, and it felt like that. Like, even though we didn't have a tree between each other, it was way further than that, but all of that stuff felt real as a kid. And then now watching it as an adult, you can see this works on an adult level too. I'm no longer as invested, even though I feel empathy and I still get those nostalgic vibes from how I felt about this movie. I now can, as an older person, can go, wow, you may regret a lot of different things throughout your life. There's a sadness to each, the town barber, really wanting this affection, or, maybe it's lust, but he seems to be romantic, and how he wants that to come out. And, how I just want to, win the lottery, and then you'll see I'll be selling great stuff, from the cigar. Like, all of those things tend to hit you differently now. And I think that's what makes, I think a lot of the best movies that we count as children's movies that still hold up and are classics, build off of being able to see it, adults writing things that have a lot of layers. I mean, heck, look now at even watching Bugs Bunny cartoons. When you watch them as an adult, you're like, whoa, I missed all of this stuff. How did I miss that? And the idea is that you can watch it as a child one way and as an adult another way. And I think this succeeds in so many ways in that I did not anticipate when I bought the DVD to do this. This episode.
The same here. The other theme, beyond this, like this thing about aging and so forth, but that's tied into it, is this idea of wasting your days in pursuing a dream that is unattainable for you, or like your opportunity to attain it has passed, or whatever happens to be, or it's kind of like a 1 in a million kind of thing, like winning the lottery or whatever, or having like exotic women from Europe suddenly descending on your little town in Illinois, or the rather than living in the moment, either like living in the past with your regret, or dreaming of this alternate present where you're somebody other than who you are, instead of like accepting yourself with your flaws and enjoying the moment. I mean, the very last scene where Holloway and the two boys are, like, run into town, and it's like they touch the barber's pole, and he goes, Ty, and just the joy on his face. Here he is in his like late 50s, but he's like living the moment now, finally, and like freeing himself of like being stymied in like what should have been and what could have been. And that, I mean, for an adult is something powerful to see on the screen, because we do tend to do that. We too tend to get wistful and nostalgic and wish that we had done something different and like replay moments in our lives again and again and again and think to ourselves, if only I had done this, if only I had told her I loved her, if only I had kissed him, if only I had like stood up when they said this horrible thing to my mother, like whatever it is, we torment ourselves with that. And
well, that even play. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I'm fine. I'm done. We torment ourselves.
That even plays into the end
Yeah.
where I don't know if it quite works in the way it's delivered. Like I don't want to critique it too much, but part of it worked. But what they're really trying to say, where he says, "Oh, no, don't die," and Holloway says, "No, you can't say that. Don't basically don't speak those words or else it might happen."
Yeah.
Instead, the way to bring your friend back is you have to frolic. You have to be a kid. Like don't do the adult thing. You're kids.
Also,
do kids things.
Yeah.
And that's also just powerful.
I think it's not quite as powerful as what happens in the book, where so in the movie they give Cougar's his demise, they give it to Dark, because that's actually speeding up until he's a skeleton is actually what happens to Cougar in the book. And what happens with Dark is that he turns himself into a child, but Holloway recognizes that it's him, and he hugs him with all the love that you would want to pour out on a little kid. And Dark just can't bear it. He can't bear this outpouring of like love and kindness and just adult concern for a child, and he's destroyed by it. And I mean, I think that probably would be a lot harder to put across on the screen, and so I get like this spinning wheel of Raiders of the Lost Ark because he's like turning into it looks like something from Raiders of the Lost Ark.
I have to say, the kid who plays the little kid version of Mr. Is it Cougar? Is that the character?
Yeah, Mr. Cougar. Yeah.
That kid was amazing. I loved that. He like gave me chills.
Yeah, he was scary.
So he was first of all, the effect of the backward carousel actually works pretty well for me. I thought it was great. And so then so Cougar becomes a kid so that he can go off and be like do the Mr. Dark's bidding in the town as a kid. But that kid is really scary. Like just the way he could fix his stare and just look so mean. I was like, oh my gosh,
he picks up the rock. You really think for a second that he's just going to crack Will's skull open.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes back to why I don't think maybe this would have quite played as well in 1983 as it might have even a decade later, because like the 1983 thing to do would be to brain that kid's head in, and there would be like blood and guts all over the screen, because that's where we were at in the 1980s with horror films. But this movie almost feels like a throwback in some ways. And
like it was filmed in like the 60s.
I was going to go into influences in other works, but I think we've kind of touched on that all throughout that. So what I would like to talk about, because I know Julia has a love-hate relationship with this. Before we get to final thoughts, I want to talk about the spider scene.
No, it's so scary. I didn't know before I watched it that scene was done a year later. However, I did feel like one of the kids' voices was suddenly really deep. I was like, what is going on? But anyway, so that made more sense when
their hair looked different too. Yeah, it was kind of
they looked a little different. But I was just too traumatized by the spiders to really notice what anybody looked like. No, the fact that it turns out to apparently be a shared nightmare, basically, or a shared illusion, and which I guess is a good thing, but it's equally traumatic. But yeah, just that they just feel well. It's like you said, David, that they have the system where they can come into each other's rooms. And so I guess it's the lightning storm that's what was it that starts it where they end up in the same room together? Is it like lightning and stuff? Yeah.
There's like lightning, and there's like some kind of like spooky green energy that's trying to get in.
He releases the
evil Puff the Magic Dragon
to track them down, basically.
Yeah. Marijuana smoke floating.
Well, I think it somehow has to do with Pam Greer, because like earlier when they sneak into her I'm blanking on what the hell you call her cart, her carnival cart, that she has control over a tarantula at that point, and they actually show her like petting the tarantula.
Yeah.
Well, her kind of gauntlets as well as all the veil, all of her lace is a spider web. So
Like I
she's kind of
said,
got this two
goth
forms
icon.
of like
Hashtag
almost,
goth icon.
yeah, but it worked perfectly in almost any like vampire movie. And the way they shoot her, she's kind of very super vampy, and she has kind of those two, like a kind of Egyptian goddess kind of look at one point, and then her other aspect is this spider lady kind of costume.
Yeah, I was like, what should be called Ariadne or something?
Yeah, but yeah, he sends out that evil to go find them, but I guess also the mandate is to do horrible things, nightmares at the very least. But it can't. It's having trouble because there's a certain amount of protection with the lightning rod. But all that stuff, that spider sequence is,
No,
they're
I thought for sure
everywhere.
Jim was gonna
That's
get
traumatizing.
killed. I thought Jim was gonna get killed in that scene because you've got Will on the bed, it was like just shaking, and then poor Jim is on the floor fighting all the spiders off and stepping on them and having them crawl over. This is horrible, horrible, horrible.
When I saw that though, Julia, I was like, oh no, Julia has to watch this scene. Like, I did think of you like, oh no, this is I can't wait till we talk about this because this is not going to be a fun time.
No, I don't enjoy spiders. It was
Yeah, I
effectively
do remember, and
So-
that stuff's scary too. And I think that's part of the children's adventure part of it that I remember. Two friends facing this adversity. But like I said, reading
it feels very
about
very goosebumps.
yeah, reading about the effects they cut, I still wish we could get a special edition that had those scenes. I mean, who knows if they even exist or if they were thrown out, or you can never tell with film elements like that. I wish that I could see those just because I'm curious about effects, and it is Disney after all. So even if it didn't quite work, I bet there was some cool stuff. And Stan Winston's uncredited for special makeup effects, and he's amazing. So anything he had a hand in, I'm sure, was at least pretty cool if he did any of those cut scenes. I wish there was an archive somewhere of that because it sounds intriguing.
Yeah, that would be really interesting. I don't know where you can look for something like that.
So I feel like pretty thoroughly dissected this. Let's go back around to get final thoughts. I believe I started with Mr. David.
Yeah, so I mean, my final thoughts are that it is definitely a film worth watching. Anybody who likes like fantasy horror should definitely check it out. I think that it has kind of a slow start, and some of the kids acting is a little iffy. I wasn't always pleased with some of the decisions they did and the reshoots, but overall, as like this whimsical and also really frightening kind of meditation on desire and dreams and regret, and how the value of human relationships and living the moment and being, I guess we would say, being present with people is so much more important than pursuing your little fantasies that you wish that you could live. I think that resonates really, really well, and I think it's fantastically done, with some just amazing acting from Jason Robards and Jonathan Pryce and Pam Greer that will just set you back in your seat about halfway through the film when we get to it. It's just really, really worth hanging in there through some of the bumpier spots to get to those final scenes. Yeah, so I mean, definitely something that like I said, I hadn't seen since I was 13 years old, but that I would like to put on my rotation now and see every couple of years. I think it's worth it.
Right on, Julia.
Well, we didn't talk about the end with the whole mirrors, the Hall of Mirrors and all
The
that.
mirror maze.
Yeah, I thought that was, clearly that's some of the more dated, like all of the shattering mirrors and all that kind of stuff, and a lot of the light effects. Those are more dated. It's clearly, I think it would be interesting to see a version with more current effects. But I thought it was neat, the idea that, that the child is able to save the father by reminding him that he does love him and that he's not, because I think that's very typical. I mean, certainly, I don't want to speak for Jason, but just my observation of Jason is that he definitely sees any kind of failure as a father as like defining him. You know what I mean? When that happens. And so I think, that reminding having the child remind the father that, no, you're actually a really great dad and I love you. And just because this one thing happened this one time doesn't mean you're not worth living. You know what I mean? I thought that was really powerful. Very interesting. So, yeah, I like that a lot. I think the mother characters in this film are very, kind of undeveloped. And so I didn't really have anybody to connect with as a mom because, they're just kind of in the background, but that's okay because that wasn't what the story was about. So I did want to talk about that, but yeah, I just think those performances were incredible. Of the ones that you mentioned, the three main adults, I guess, and then that one little kid. Just was like, wow. But yeah, I think it's definitely worth watching, and I really wish they would bring it to Disney Plus. I don't own it, and so I procrastinated on getting it until Sunday, and then regretted it deeply because the only copy that I could find was at a library that was half an hour away. So I ended up driving an hour to go get it at the library. So I was like, if I had done it earlier in the week, I could have had my library just requested it to be brought to my library. I was like, I don't have time now. So anyway, but it was definitely worth watching.
Awesome. Tony?
Yeah, I really enjoyed this movie, and I really enjoyed revisiting it as an adult and seeing how it played out. And that's always one of those things. I feel bad sometimes when I don't reread the book, but there's X amount of time in the day, so I apologize to anybody who's like, you really should do your research there, buddy. But I should have. I admit that's a failing on my. There's my regret, right? That's part of how Dark will twist
You're
things.
a failure.
Your podcast. You should research the things you
Mr.
love.
Dark is he's going to be waiting
Obviously,
to hang up in a second.
yeah. Obviously, you don't take it seriously. Ugh, no, Dark. I love doing this with my friends. But I really enjoyed this. It has some great performances, and again, going back to the library scene alone is something. If you're able to get it, and that's the thing. I actually bought it. I bought the DVD, and luckily I hit it around the time that it was not that expensive. But with Amazon speculation, prices can go into crazy territory of within these just outrageous prices sometimes, and I hit it when it wasn't that. But I am surprised that whoever's making the decisions has decided, yeah, that DVD, and the DVD's old enough that there's actually a widescreen or like pan and scan choice.
Yeah.
So that I was surprised because we were trying to actually. I guess we found it because we were trying to turn off the captions, and then I go, "What's the setup?" Wait, oh wow, yeah, because for in the early days of DVD, a lot of times you'd have that because nobody had widescreen TVs, or very few people had widescreen TVs. I guess that's why there's the two options.
Mhm.
So that was interesting, and that's how old the DVD is. Either that, or they just kept that when they made a newer DVD. I think there's also an Anchor Bay DVD, if I remember correctly. I don't think this is it, but yeah, I wish that it was out in better circulation, because I think there's a lot to get from it, at least a lot to watch, even if it is flawed. And seeing Pam Greer in this really exotic vampy role is really cool. The Dust Witch character, the people who have been influenced by it, you can see because there's ripples in gothy kind of movies past this.
Music
And
videos.
those are probably the people. Yeah, those are probably the people who saw this when they were younger, and it left a huge impression. And I think that's fascinating. I think there's a lot to it, and I hope that we get a cool Blu-ray of it. I mean, even the Black Hole Blu-ray though was a Disney exclusive, like through their kind of Disney Vault service. So who knows if they would even do that for this? But I do wish that I could get an upgrade physical copy, preferably with all the effect shots that they cut. That would be amazing. That's what I would want.
That would be great bonus material.
So for my part, I think that this is, again, I'm not saying that this is flawless. Like, I don't have like those deep set nostalgia goggles that I can't say that there aren't things that could be improved. But I think it's anchored by this sophistication and elegance and some really amazing performances. And I think that just again, from such a fascinating what we think of Disney now and what Disney was when this came out, I just think that all of the movies that they produced during that time period are so fascinating and odd and dark. And I really love them, and I think this is a good part of that legacy. And it's also a fall favorite. Like, we're watching it in November. I really do think it's a better, Halloween time movie, but it's not specifically Halloween. But it
Agreed.
definitely, I would say it would be, if you were going to do like a Halloween movie marathon, it definitely wouldn't be a bad thing to put into the shuffle because of its discussion of, a lot of the themes we associate with Halloween, period. So I think that this is just a fascinating movie to look back on. And on that note, I think we should go back around and do endorsements before getting on out of here for the evening. David, what have you been getting into?
Well, today in the mail, I got this really beautiful version of Dracula with the Edward Gorey illustrations, and it is just got like a velvet cover, or like a velvet red cover with the embossed Dracula on the front of it. It's just freaking here. I'm gonna turn my camera on. So I think I showed it to you guys before, but I'm gonna show it to you again just so you see it.
I did see you hold it up to the camera earlier.
Amazingly beautiful. So yeah, and it cost me like $40 or whatever, but it is beautiful. And since
that is very cool.
I'm working on a project that's kind of a queer BIPOC remixing of like Dracula. Yeah, we'll see whether my agent wants to rep that. But I'm like rereading the book and doing a lot of like research and stuff like that. So I'm definitely into it. And well, as you might imagine, I'm still watching lots of K-dramas. But three that I yeah, I know. Isn't that hard to believe? Three that I would recommend that kind of intersect with this podcast. One of them is My Name, which is on Netflix, which is just, I mean, to me, it's like female Korean John Wick, but like better. So it's just really, really badass. Quick, I think it's like maybe 8 episodes, 8 episodes. Really well done, incredible fight scenes, just a really compelling storyline. If you like that kind of like gritty revenge crime stuff with lots of ass kicking, it's definitely something I'd recommend. A really cool
I'm like, go on.
Tell me more,
What?
sir, about this this girl, teenage girl who believes her father is involved in like drug trafficking. He's gone missing and she's living on her own. And he gets like killed, and she believes that it's by the cops, and so she like joins the criminal organization to train to be a killer so she could take her revenge. But there's like this massive twist that like just blows her like entire life up, and it's just really fascinating. And then the other two, the one that is finished was Lovers of the Red Sky, which is like this really cool period supernatural film with all kinds of weird revenge stuff like that, but like possession by this demonic like god of chaos, and just all kinds of really, really cool, groovy, scary special effects. Tony was talking about like the smoke and fog and all that kind of stuff that seemed like it was more tactile at a certain time. And there's this effect that's being used a lot in Korean supernatural shows that is like this kind of like black smoke kind of drifting off of characters. I don't know how to explain it, but that's being done really well. I mean, it's clearly CGI, but like it has some kind of texture to it, and they use that a lot. And then a new series I started watching is Happiness, which is, despite its title, a zombie, a contemporary zombie show from South Korea that has it's kind of like zombie / vampire. It's brought on by a drug or whatever. It's just really, really good. Really well done, great acting and stuff like that. So, yep, just I'm getting my K-drama fix with some spooky stuff because of the time of year or whatever. So that's me.
All right, Julia.
Well, I'm irritated because I know there was something that I've been excited to talk about, and then I've forgotten what it was. But I did finally watch. We finally got we got Apple Plus or Apple TV, what it's called. And so we finally watched Ted Lasso, binge watched Ted Lasso. So good, just as I had been told it was. Really, really good. And I've been watching the new episodes of The Morning Show because I love that series as well. And then the new Doctor Who episode. So I've been having a lot of fun watching the new stuff that's come back out. Yeah, but I can't. I feel like there was something else. But anyway, whoever of my people has told me Ted Lasso was great, you were right.
Tony?
I have a few things. One of the most interesting things is I saw a double feature of Godzilla 84 and Godzilla versus Biollante, and each of those had the Janus logo in front of them. The Criterion style logo made me hope that we're gonna eventually get another box set that covers from 84 on, but we'll see. That's right now it's pure speculation, but a lot of people online have also been to those screenings going, "Whoa, wait, what?"
Biollante
So-
hasn't been available in the States in years, so
It's
that
out
would
of
make me
print,
really
yeah.
happy.
Oh, it was a nice print too, and seeing that logo and especially in front of it made me go, can we get this? And that was really great. My friends in the band Duel, of which they're guitarist, Jeff Henson just celebrated the 5-year anniversary of his studio, Red Nova Ranch, where we recorded Rain Nye's album for Rise from Fire and the last Deserts of Mars EP. Red Nova Ranch was where we recorded that. And his band Duel has released their new album called Incarnate Persona, and that's really cool. If you like Deserts of Mars, you'll most likely like Duel, and Jeff's a good friend, and I was just at the anniversary of that. My friend Phil Mucci he's in the last days of his Indiegogo for Professor Dario Bava, Orgy of the Blood Freaks comic. And Phil's been a long time friend. He's done a lot of videos. I think I've mentioned him before. He's done stuff for Metallica, for High on Fire, tons of video stuff. His own short films are great, and he's branched out into doing comics. And that's been really cool. But he's in the last days of that Indiegogo campaign. So as fans of horror and comics, that hits, and friendship, that hits me hard. So I've already backed it, and his previous Dario Bava comic was really great too. And finally on Netflix, if you haven't seen The Harder They Fall, is awesome. I really like that. It's very stylized Western, fantastic cast. I don't want to reveal too much actually, because it's really lots of actors you've seen. Idris Elba is in it. It's quite the pedigree cast doing a Western. And it's stylized, but in a really awesome way. And I dug it a lot. So if you haven't seen The Harder They Fall, I definitely suggest checking that out, because it's pretty awesome. And also casting people of color in a Western, who are just as much part of history as anybody else. Like having a full cast where they're just like, here it is. Also, fantastic. So and everybody brings their A game. I found it to be thoroughly enjoyable. Work for me. If you want to see a modern Western, this has all of the things I think you would dig.
I thought of one thing. I don't remember, I don't think I had seen it yet when we last met, but the French Dispatch. I don't know if I talked about that, but that's the new Wes Anderson film, and it's so great. It's so gorgeous to look at. Really weird, interesting, great cast. So if you have a chance to see that, I think it should probably be streaming pretty soon. If
I
it hasn't
haven't
already.
seen it, but I don't know, Julia, if you saw where they named the section of West Anderson Lane in Austin Wes Anderson Lane. They renamed it.
That's great.
But that was a recent. That
I love it.
specifically, there's a sign up by where the Village Draft House. 'Cause,
Nice.
a lot of his films play there pretty well.
That's awesome.
So that was a Draft House thing where they changed it over. And also, I do want to plug one final thing. We also did. Jason and I did an interview about the Weird Wednesday book. And with our friend Lars, and that book, Warped and Faded, is just such a great nostalgia trip, as well as an insight into a very specific time period where Jason and I were going to Weird Wednesday all the time. Like we were there all the time, so it's very personal. account of that time period in the draft house and in Austin. And we were writing together a lot, but it's not just that. And a lot of friends of ours are in that as well. Oh, actually, one of Jason's pages for Sylvia Faust is in there.
Awesome.
Because it has the sort of the apocalypse draft house. So there's a piece of Jason comic in there. And it makes a really good companion book because I don't know if all the movies for Weird Wednesday are in there, but it also is like a kind of one of those psychotronic guides to genre film that was shown at Weird Wednesday. So it's a catalog of genre film as well as a chronicle of a certain time period of Austin film legend, punk rockness, all of these things, a history told by friends of ours and part of what we were living at the time. But I think it was funny. Somebody was called out like, "Oh, it's too much inside baseball." But I know that part of it's nostalgia for me because we were just there all the time. But I find tales like that fascinating myself. Even if I wasn't part of it, I like the insight of, hey, this is what was going on, during this time period in Austin film land, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't. Maybe it's because I know people and maybe I'm also inside baseball on it, so it doesn't affect me. But I thought that's kind of a crummy critique in a way. I don't know, whatever you can critique however you want, but I personally find that fascinating. I think people who listen in have heard way more enough about Weird Wednesday than perhaps they might want, but the book kind of brings all of that home. And Warped and Faded is the name of the book. It's put out through Mondo.
I think every book is in somebody's inside baseball. I mean, it's like, but you want to take a journey through somebody else's eyes. Basically, it's like, I don't know. I think, if it's not your thing, then don't read it.
It's beautifully put together. It's a really nicely put together book as well. So
Awesome.
That adds to it. It's high quality throughout. Warped and Faded, Weird Wednesday, and the Birth of the American Genre Film Archive is the full name.
Excellent.
Nice. So I did finally get around to watching Shang-Chi on
Yay.
Disney Plus. I really, really enjoyed that. I think it was a nice change of. I know there's still a lot of like Marvel touchstones in it, but I think doing that sort of mixture of like high fantasy and martial arts changed it up enough that it didn't like just another superhero movie. It kind of felt more like a fantasy movie set in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I really think that is one of the best villains that they have done.
Mm-hmm.
Like just like really successful in creating a villain with some depth to him, which Marvel has been accused of not doing that often enough, but this time I think they really did succeed. I also want to throw, if you are not watching Chucky TV show and you're a horror fan, you are missing out, because it's I know it sounds absurd, I know it sounds like it should not work doing a TV show based on Child's Play, but it's really, really well done, and it's got so many people from the film series involved in it, and they might have been the best. And it features a jaw-dropping performance from Fiona Dourif, who is Brad Dourif, the voice of Chucky they make her up to look like her dad looked in the first movie, and she plays her dad, or plays her dad's character, I should say. But phenomenal, just like really extremely like spookily accurate of like the body language and everything of like Brad in that time period, and just really impressed with it. And I think the show is a gift to the horror fans. I think if you aren't watching it, you really should do yourself a favor. You can watch it on Sci-Fi Channel. It's available on Amazon. That you have to pay for it on Amazon, but it's only $1.99 an episode, so it's not super expensive to watch. But if you sign up for the Sci-Fi app, you can at least watch like the first 5 episodes for free. I also have seen like the first 2 episodes of the new Dexter. I'm still kind of on the fence about where they're going, because I wasn't really sure if we needed a revival of Dexter, but it's a lot better than I thought it was going to be. It's very different from the old show, but I think that's to its credit. Again, not 100% sold on it yet, but it's definitely got some high points on it. I guess that means we are done. We will be back on what now?
Oh, hey, Drew, I just want to say, I want to interject. If you liked Shang-Chi, you might like the latest Journey to the West movies. Like, if you're looking for something to scratch that itch, which it's hard because Michelle Yeoh and the whole cast on that is just amazing. I enjoyed the movie a lot too. But if you're looking for kind of in that area of high fantasy, martial arts action, you might want to check out the Journey to the West stuff that's come out over the past few years. It's pretty rocking. But I also need to check out the Chucky stuff. Like
Chucky is
great.
extremely well done.
Before you send us off, Drew, I just want to say you've done a great job, and thank you to David.
Yeah, thank you for joining it. Yeah, thank you for joining us, David. It was great to have you back. Thank you, Jason, for letting me host this episode. And
Jason just walked in the house and says hi.
Hello, Jason.
Awesome.
And we are going to be back on Sunday. I will be handing the baton back to Mr. Henderson, so I can just be discussing Ghostbusters Afterlife, and I'm counting the seconds. I am just, you have no idea. This is the first movie I'll have seen in the theater since the pandemic started. And I am, this is the only thing that I would risk COVID for, literally. Like no other movie mattered as to me. I was like, everything else I will wait until it's streaming, but Ghostbusters Afterlife, gotta see that on the big screen. So excited to be talking about that on Sunday, and I think our friends from the Monster Movie Happy Hour might be joining us for that. So hopefully they will bring us a Ghostbusters themed cocktail to suggest to y'all. Anyway,
bringing back Ecto Cooler, by the way, Drew.
Oh,
I just saw the news earlier.
I know.
And the Draft House is going to have a version of Ecto Cooler, so good times all the way around.
Ecto Cooler all around. All right. Good night, everybody.
Thanks.
Good night.
Night.
Bye.